In the late 1700s, this part of North Carolina was an untamed land, a land rich in forest and game. It drew settlers looking for wide-open space to raise their families. One such man was John Reed, an illiterate German immigrant who had deserted the British Army in 1782. He acquired this land in what soon became Cabarrus County. Little did Reed or anyone know the ground beneath their feet held a secret treasure. In 1799, Reed's 12-year-old son Conrad was playing in Little Meadow Creek when he found a yellow rock shining in the water. It weighed 17 pounds. John Reed used the rock as a doorstop at his family's home without knowing that his son had made the first confirmed discovery of gold in the United States.
Out of curiosity, John Reed took that heavy rock with him on a shopping trip to Fayetteville. A couple years later, in 1802, a jeweler there told him the rock was gold and fluxed it into a bar for him and offered to buy it from John. John didn't know what it was worth, so he sold it for $3.50. Later, they found out it was worth $3,600.
Reed discovered his mistake soon enough and formed a partnership with 3 other men to provide 2 enslaved people apiece to help find the fortune he hoped was on his land. Although word of Reed's strike even came to the attention of President Thomas Jefferson, almost no one in North Carolina mined for gold full time. Even Reed had different priorities.
Planting and harvesting crops were John's interests. They were only in mining as a part-time business. John Reed, some of the family members, and a couple of slaves that he had. One of those slaves, by the name of Peter, found a nugget that weighed 28 pounds just a few years later, and that nugget was the largest nugget found in the U.S. outside of California.
Mining creek beds and nearby soil required workers to dig shallow holes in the hope of finding gold at the bottom of their pans or rockers. For the first several decades of the 1800s, this land was far and away America's most prolific gold-producing region, even though it was mined only on a part-time basis. By 1830, Reed and his partners had found an estimated $200,000 in gold in Little Meadow Creek, an absolute fortune in those times.
You have to remember that in this part of the state, a typical wage was only $3.50 a week.
Everything changed in 1825 when a farmer named Matthias Barringer made a startling discovery. He stumbled upon gold embedded in a vein of quartz rock on his farm 20 miles from John Reed.
Over time, geological conditions were just right for gold to be formed in a band of land going from a northeast to southwest direction, beginning up near Greensboro and stretching down towards Charlotte into South Carolina and Georgia.
Word of Barringer's finds spread like wildfire, and the United States' first gold rush was on. Unlike placer mining, which sought gold near the surface, lode mining, underground mining to extract quartz rock containing gold, required vast amounts of money to dig giant pits or even more costly shafts and tunnels. Gold mining was going on in more than a third of North Carolina's counties. The early 1830s were the boom years, and North Carolina became known as the Golden State. The lure of a bigger bonanza lay underground, and reluctantly John Reed joined in.
Mining underground was difficult at best. The rock formations did not want to give up their secrets easily. A lantern or a candle was the only source of illumination, and not very much at that. The most efficient way to break large amounts of quartz loose was to blast it with black powder. Blasting was dangerous, and there was always the risk of a cave-in.
A wheelbarrow was the best way of getting the rock to a place where it could be hoisted out of the tunnel. It was backbreaking work with no promise that gold would be found when the rock was chemically analyzed by an assayer. Frequently, the results came back negative, forcing workers to dig and blast in another direction. Enslaved people made up a sizable percentage of the workers at some of the mines and served in a number of capacities above and below ground. The southern Piedmont was the heart of gold country. Miners grew tired of the long trips to Philadelphia to have gold made into coins. To meet this need, the Beckler Mint opened in 1831. State leaders convinced the federal government to build a branch mint in Charlotte, where a number of productive mines also operated. Opened in 1837, it was only the second U.S. government mint. By 1840, many of the deep mines were played out, and workers headed to more promising strikes in South Carolina and Georgia. At the Reed mine, a family dispute caused production to stop, and by the time John Reed died in 1845, the gold rush appeared completely over. But a neglected area just 10 miles north of Reed's mine was finally being explored.
Gold had been discovered here at Gold Hill in 1824. By 1842, George Barnhart, having left Reed Gold Mine, arrived at Gold Hill and dug the Barnhart Shaft. That discovery was so rich, the town became a boom town.
The new town of Gold Hill became the most productive gold mining site east of the Mississippi River for most of the 1850s.
By 1857, gold mining was so successful here that Harper's Weekly, a national news magazine, sent a writer and illustrator here to write the Gold Hill story.
But the boom town went bust in 1861 when the last of the mining companies went bankrupt. Gold mining across North Carolina and much of the South effectively ceased during the Civil War. Following the war, gold mining slowly resumed. Operations were the most active at Gold Hill and in the Charlotte area. New technologies, such as this iron stamp mill, made separating gold from rock more efficient. But equipment and labor were expensive, and the amount of gold extracted did not produce significant profits for investors, if any at all. The glory days were a thing of the past. The same proved to be true at this site for several decades after the war. The mine passed through a series of owners. Oliver Kelly purchased the mine in 1890. That proved to be a good decision because in 1896, a 23-pound nugget was discovered by local merchant Jacob Shin. It was just 3 feet below the surface in an area that had been repeatedly mined for many decades. Miners dug much deeper than Reed ever had, but found nothing worth their investment. The Kelly family closed the mine in 1912. They did allow locals to pan for gold for many decades until the state of North Carolina acquired this property in 1971. Gold. Its magical hold on America began here.